Ask anyone in Washington, D.C. for the President's house, and you'll probably be directed to a rather well-known address on Pennsylvania Avenue. But just a few blocks away is another presidential home, not quite as grand, but just as interesting. Hi, I'm Joe Ruggiero, editor of the Living magazine, and we're going to visit the unique residence of President Woodrow Wilson. Nestled among the townhouses of Embassy Row, the house is a virtual time capsule of Wilson's life in the 1920s. Don't go away.
The Living magazine, brought to you by Ethan Allen Galleries. We help you make beautiful rooms.
Woodrow Wilson was the only former president to make his home in the nation's capital following his term of office. President Wilson spent his retirement years here, in this house, receiving many prominent visitors. The house, its furnishings, and varied mementos were carefully preserved by his wife, Edith, and is open to the public on a daily basis. As we toured the rooms, I spoke with Ann Blair, who as a young bride visited the Wilson home on many occasions, and Earl James, director of Woodrow Wilson House, which is maintained by the National Trust for Historic Preservation.
Well, we're very fortunate here with this museum in that Mrs. Wilson, Edith Wilson, the president's widow, lived many years after he had died. She died in 1961, he had died in 1924. She had kept the entire collection intact, all of the furnishings, all the memorabilia, everything. Her intention was to create a memorial to the president. So what you have here is a collection that has a lot of interest and strength from the fact that everything belonged to the Wilsons.
She was, of course, was an avid Democrat and an avid Virginian, but I guess it was the Democratic part that meant that when Mrs. Kennedy first arrived at the White House, the very first call, unofficial call, that she made anywhere in this area was right here in this house to call on Mrs. Wilson, and I'm sure Mrs. Wilson was very proud and pleased.
Did she know that her house was going to be a museum?
Oh yes, she wanted that always. She used to talk about that, and the fact that it would be, and she hoped people, and especially young people, would enjoy coming and seeing just the way it was when Mr. Wilson was here. And I don't think she ever changed it a stick after he died.
The Victrola was a favorite of President Wilson. It's one of the objects that really shows the warmer side of his personality, part of his enjoyment of entertainment of a wide variety.
I noticed there's a motion picture projector in this room as well.
Yes, President Wilson was a movie fan. He loved the silent movies, and when he couldn't go to see a new release, the manager of the theater would send the film over here and have it shown in this room.
He also utilized the medium of radio, didn't he?
He did. As a matter of fact, he was really the first president to use radio to broadcast nationally. From this room in 1923, in the fall, before he died in the spring of 24, he broadcast an Armistice Day speech in November. He was very ill at that time, and his wife Edith had to prompt him during the speech, reading from his notes. Very poignantly, at the end of the speech, before the radio signal was turned off, you hear Woodrow Wilson saying to his wife, "That's all, isn't it?"
Interesting. What kinds of things did she serve?
Well, I used to come and play bridge, and we were invited to come at 11 in the morning. Then we would go downstairs for lunch, and it would be the creamiest meal that you could possibly imagine. Probably creamed chicken and patty shells, creamed peas, a very rich dressing on the salad, hot rolls brimming with butter, and then for dessert something like strawberry meringue pie with whipped cream. She loved needlepoint. She always had some piece in work, and I know she did all those beautiful chairs in the dining room.
Woodrow Wilson grew up a very formal person, and when he lived here, he would not sit in the formal dining room, whether it was alone or with his wife or with company, unless he was dressed for dinner. And that being a large chore for him in his later years, he and his wife would eat breakfast and some of their other meals, usually in the solarium. It was a very small, intimate space, a very good view of the garden. They would sit there and have their breakfast and read the paper. And occasionally they would eat in here, but primarily in the solarium.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'm Joe Ruggiero for this edition of the Living magazine.
The Living Magazine has been brought to you by Ethan Allen Galleries.